Sometime around 62 AD, the philosopher Seneca stopped by the Roman arena at midday, right between the morning animal hunts and the afternoon gladiator matches. He was expecting comic acts and light entertainment, the usual filler that ran through the lunch break, while most of the crowd went home to eat. In a letter to his friend Lucilius, he described the horror of what he actually saw: men with no armor and no training, driven out into the dirt to butcher each other until no one was left standing. He wrote that the morning shows had at least been merciful by comparison. What happened at noon in a Roman arena was a scheduled part of the program, and it almost never appears in the paintings, the mosaics, or the Hollywood movies. The ancient world was built on mass entertainment that was darker, wealthier, and more absurd than we are ever told. And somewhere down this list, we will meet a single athlete who survived the chaos, beat the odds 4,000 times, and became so wealthy his net worth dwarfs any sports star alive today. Hold on to that. Fact number 1, the Fidenae collapse. In 27 AD, a former slave named Attilius built a massive wooden amphitheater at Fidenae, a town just north of Rome. The Emperor Tiberius disliked public games and had severely cut them back for years, so when Attilius announced brand new gladiator shows, entertainment-starved Romans flooded out of the capital in enormous numbers. Seeking a quick profit, Attilius had skipped the expensive parts of construction. He never sank proper foundations, and the timber frame was left unsecured. Under the weight of the massive crowd, the packed structure tore apart and collapsed both inward and outward. The Roman historian Tacitus puts the dead and maimed at 50,000 people. Suetonius, more conservative, says more than 20,000 were killed. Even the lower figure makes it the deadliest stadium disaster in recorded human history, nearly 2,000 years later. The Senate's response says everything about Roman priorities. They exiled Attilius, which was his entire criminal penalty, and then passed a new law requiring that future amphitheaters be built on ground of proven solidity, and that no one worth less than 400,000 sesterces could host games at all. The lesson Rome drew from 20,000 dead spectators was simply that mass entertainment should be reserved for the rich. A few entries from now, the most famous line ever spoken in an arena comes up, and almost everything you think you know about it is wrong. Fact number 2, fatal charades. That midday slot Seneca wandered into eventually evolved into something far more elaborate. Historians use the term fatal charades for it. Public executions staged as live scenes from mythology, with the condemned prisoner cast in the role of the character who dies. The poet Martial described these approvingly at the opening games of the Colosseum in 80 AD. One prisoner was cast as Laureolus, a notorious bandit from a popular stage comedy. He was hung on a cross and mauled by a wild bear while the audience watched. Martial highly praised the realism. Another prisoner was dressed as Orpheus, surrounded by elaborate stage scenery and tame animals charmed by his music, before being torn apart by a bear as the grand finale. The victims' real names were never recorded. Martial speculated casually about whether the man on the cross had murdered his master, robbed a temple, or set fires in the city as though the crime hardly mattered. These brutal productions had massive budgets, painted scenery, and complex trapdoor lifts under the arena floor. The Roman state spent serious money turning its executions into scripted theater. Fact number 3, the death rate. The popular image of every single gladiator fight ending in death doesn't survive contact with actual Roman economics. Gladiators took years of expensive care to train, and most were leased to show organizers rather than owned by them. The legal contracts made a dead gladiator far more expensive than a live one. The organizer owed a standard rental fee if his fighters walked out of the arena alive, but had to pay the full, exorbitant replacement price if they died. Fight records from the 1st century reveal that roughly only one match in 10 ended in a death. In 177 AD, Marcus Aurelius capped gladiator prices by decree, and surviving copies of that law list top-class fighters at up to 15,000 sesterces, more than a decade's pay for a Roman legionary. Ancient tombstones back this up. A Syrian fighter named Flamma, buried in Sicily, fought 34 times, won 21, drew 9, and lost 4, and he was spared by the crowd in every single loss. He was offered the wooden sword of retirement 4 separate times, refused it every time, and finally died in the arena at age 30. The Colosseum itself is hiding a dark secret, a message in its own stones that sat completely unread for 1,500 years. Fact number 4, the one salute. The phrase, "those about to die salute you," appears in every gladiator movie ever made, but in the entire ancient record, it was spoken exactly once, and the men who said it were not gladiators. It happened in 52 AD, when the Emperor Claudius staged a massive naval battle on the Fucine Lake using 19,000 condemned prisoners crewing real warships. Before the slaughter, the men called out, "Hail, Emperor! Those who are about to die salute you," hoping for a mass pardon. Claudius famously answered, "Or not." The prisoners took that ambiguous answer as an official pardon and refused to fight. The emperor had to climb down from his seat and limp along the shoreline, furiously threatening to destroy them all with fire before the battle finally started. The entire event existed to celebrate a failed infrastructure project. 30,000 workers had spent 11 years digging a tunnel to drain the lake. When the tunnel was opened, it turned out to have been dug too shallow, and the water barely moved. At the restaged opening, the outflow suddenly surged and nearly swept away the imperial banquet. The most quoted line in Roman entertainment actually comes from a hostage standoff at a failed public works launch. Fact number 5, the hidden inscription. In 1995, an epigrapher examined a heavy marble block from the Colosseum that carried a standard 5th century inscription. Underneath the carved letters, he found rows of small, ghost-like peg holes, the mounting points for an older text in bronze letters that had been pried off and melted down centuries ago. Working from the hole patterns alone, he mathematically reconstructed the original dedication. The Emperor Titus had ordered the new amphitheater built ex manubis, meaning from the spoils of war. Only one war could have paid for it. Titus had brutally sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD, burned the temple, and carried its massive treasury back to Rome. The Arch of Titus, a 10-minute walk from the Colosseum, still shows ancient Roman soldiers parading the temple's sacred menorah through the streets. Historic records show 97,000 prisoners were taken in that war, and those captives were shipped to Rome as slave labor while the amphitheater was rising. The most famous entertainment venue on Earth was actually a triumphal war monument, funded by a looted temple and built by the survivors of the city it was stolen from. Remember those 1 in 10 odds gladiators faced? The man in our last fact beat worse odds more than 4,000 times and got richer doing it than any athlete alive today. Fact number 6, the richest athlete. Gladiators get all the movies, but chariot racing was the bigger business by every imaginable measure. The massive Circus Maximus held around 150,000 spectators, with some ancient sources claiming as many as 250,000, roughly 3 times the capacity of the Colosseum. A monumental inscription from 146 AD records the unbelievable career of the charioteer Gaius Appuleius Diocles, 24 years, 4,257 races, won 462 wins, and a total prize money of over 35 million sesterces. Historians ran the numbers and concluded that Diocles earned the modern equivalent of roughly $15 billion, making him the highest-paid athlete in human history. He managed to retire alive at age 42, which was its own miracle. His chief rival, Scorpus, won more than 2,000 races, but died around age 26 in a horrific mid-race crash. The Romans called these naufragia, meaning shipwrecks. The fans took the sport just as seriously as the drivers. Archaeologists routinely find lead-curse tablets buried deep at ancient circus sites, inscribed with desperate pleas to underworld demons to tangle the reins of rival teams, naming not just the enemy drivers, but each individual horse.